Hey beauties, welcome back to Real Girl Talk Podcast Radio. I am your host, Cherie Burton. I'm a medical professional, business leader, author, speaker, and adversity recovery expert, bringing you fascinating guests, business, beauty, and lifestyle tips to help you create a beautiful life, and always committed to keeping it real. Now let's dive in. Hello, beauties. Thank you for coming back to Real Girl Talk Podcast Radio. I have a special treat for you today. I was invited to be on Women Seeking Wholeness podcast radio show with Cherie Burton. She is an amazing woman. She is a feminine empowerment coach. She has programs like Stand, Speak, Shine. And so I was honored to speak on her podcast radio show. And I loved it. It had a really good message. I felt super empowered that day. And so I want to share it with you today. So my special treat is bringing you my interview with Cherie Burton.
Cherie, thank you. Thank you so much for being on today. I loved being on your show.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So we were just talking before, like, you and I spell our names the same way. I'm Cherie, you're Cherie. And we were saying how I get called Cherie all the time and you get called Cherie all the time.
I do, but actually I like the stripper name that people call me, which is Cherie.
Oh, I know. I got the big high school joke. I was. Well, your podcast is Real Girl Talk, and I just think you and I just had this great rapport when you interviewed me, and it's like, oh, I want you to come on my show because I know that anytime anyone shows up to be an influencer, whether they're doing a podcast or they're writing a book or they're working with people in any capacity, they've had to walk through some kind of personal storm. And it just so happens you've had this amazing and heartbreaking walk with grief. Mm-hmm. So I would love it if you would just share with our listeners what you walk through in your life to bring you into the space of, what is it, grief recovery specialist?
Yeah. So what is a grief recovery specialist? So, I have been called an adversity recovery expert. And like I told you before, I don't know that if I would call myself an expert.
I like that. But all of us kind of are that, like, adversity of some kind we've recovered, or, we specialize in it because we walk through it.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I guess, I would call myself an adversity recovery strategist because we're always strategizing, right, to become better and to overcome something. I guess I'll just kind of start with my story and how it all began. I guess our story begins at birth, but because of the trials and tribulations and the things that are set forth in our life changes and evolves into what I would like to think as our purpose. And, some people say, oh, there's no such thing. We don't have purposes. I completely disagree because I think our purposes are usually stemmed from that of pain. Mm-hmm. And it's those that find strength and can understand or actually have some discipline to try to understand why certain things are put in our life. And when you're able to figure some of those things out, then you can then start to find out what your purpose is. And, I thought that being someone who really I had a very unassuming childhood to where, I had a little bit of excitement. It was pretty uneventful, and that of just pure gratitude that I had two loving parents. And I went on to get married and had two children, Christine and Bryant. And I thought that my life was on an amazing path. But after 12 years of marriage, we divorced. And so I guess in a divorce, you go through a lot of trials and tribulations in that itself. You have to learn how to parent differently, right? Mm-hmm. You have to learn how to wake up on Saturday mornings differently. You have to learn how to celebrate Christmas and Thanksgiving different from what you know it. But at the same time, you have to make sure that your children don't feel the effects that you feel, which can be difficult in itself. You want them to wake up on Saturday mornings and feel that nothing has changed. And I believe that if we think that we can do that as women, we're fooling ourselves, because what we need to realize is it is changed. And we need to teach our kids that it's okay for changes, and know that something good can come out of something bad. But I went on to remarry, and I've been married for 21 years. We just celebrated 21 years this month, and we had a child. So, something great can come from that. I have a wonderful husband, like I said, of 21 years. We've been together 22 years, and have a 20-year-old son from my marriage. And at that time when I married Wendell, I thought, wow, could it get any better than this? So I finally have a man that understands what love is and that can treat me well. I had 3 beautiful kids, and, being in the healthcare industry, I had worked at the bedside, taking care of people in ICU for many years. And I had just landed an amazing corporate American position in medical business industry. And, I was on top of the world in 2007. And I was actually in California, and I live in South Louisiana. So I was over 2,000 miles away, living my dream over there, being trained for this amazing position. And the second night that I was there, I received a phone call at 2:00 in the morning to tell me that my 17-year-old son had been killed in a car accident.
I just cannot even imagine. I mean, like, what is the
Yeah.
first, do you remember the first reaction at all? I mean, what?
Yeah, I do. I do remember. And I'll tell you, Cherie, it was really crazy. I mean, it's amazing how some people say that, as a mother, you bring a child into this world. And I truly believe that that's how Bryant left. And I'll tell you that evening, at the time, which I realized later that it was at the exact time that his accident and the 911 call went out, was that I'm in a hotel room by myself, and I had an overwhelming anxiety attack. And I had never suffered such panic and anxiety. So for anyone that's ever suffered a panic attack, they know what I'm talking about, but it's crippling. You almost feel like you're having a heart attack. And being in the healthcare industry, that's the first thing we do as nurses. When you're a nurse, we know so much that we're dangerous to ourselves, because if we have a leg ache, we think it's leukemia. I mean, that's just how it is. So I'm immediately thinking, oh my gosh, I'm having a heart attack. I can't breathe. I couldn't catch my breath. And I started thinking, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong with my family? What's wrong? And all of these things, when I tell you, multiple things went through me physically and mentally and emotionally in such a short period of time. It couldn't have lasted for more than a minute, but in a minute of having that kind of anxiety is terrifying. But it went away as fast as it came on. And I learned later that would have been the exact time in Memphis, which is where my son was, that he passed away. So, when I think back, I think that he came into this world through me, and that's how he left. And I know exactly when he passed away. And I felt like I was feeling some of his anxiety in his car accident before he died, because it was told to me that he died instantly. I do believe that he did die instantly, but to be able to go off of the road and flip your truck, he had a lot of anxiety and he was terrified. And I think I felt every bit of that when he was having that. So that being said, when you find out and you get that phone call, any mother that gets called at 2:00 in the morning and has children automatically goes into a stem of panic, right? It doesn't matter if your kids are older and out of the house. It doesn't matter. If your doorbell rings or your phone rings in the middle of the night and you're a parent, you panic. Right? Because we all think about, we always worry about our children, and that's exactly what comes to the forefront of our mind.
I have to tell you, like right there, I have 6 kids of my own, and I got one of those phone calls. My daughter is now 21. When she was 15, there was a rollover, and all they told me is this is the American Fork Police Department. She's en route by ambulance. That's all they told me.
Yeah.
So I do know it, but I have to say here too that if you are a parent, I can't think of a word, like, aside from your child maybe getting abducted, but just the phone call,
Right.
That's the dreaded, anyway, keep going. But I'm just saying, like, I have to insert that there because it literally, like, is every parent's worst nightmare.
You're right. And I think that too, it's funny, the mind is a very mysterious thing, because some people that hear my story, or a majority of people that hear my story, say, I can't even imagine. Well, the thing is that when you're going through that, your mind goes into this protective. It's almost like your body protects your mind and your mind protects your soul, because I was in such denial, or felt like I had such a shield of protection over me, that the worst of the pain, if it had have penetrated me the way it should have, without me having this shield of protection that I felt that was covering me, whether it be my son, whether it be God, this shield that was protecting me, had it not been there, I think the pain would have been so excruciating. I could have died, like literally could have had a heart attack and died. But when I received the phone call, it was almost like having an out of body experience, as weird as that sounds, that you're watching yourself function, but you have no idea what you're actually doing. Your body is just automatically going through these motions without you thinking your way through them.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing I did is I called down to the front desk and asked them to ring John's room. John was one of the guys that was training with me, that we had become friends. And, we sat together in training. You know how you go to new corporate training and you make a friend. And so I called and told them I needed John's room, and because I had no idea where he was in the hotel. And they put me through, and I told him to come to my room. Now you can imagine this poor guy, he gets this phone call at 2:30 in the morning with this woman hysterically screaming that he just met 2 days ago, and says, come to my room. And he did. He came to the room, and I just remember looking at him, and I said, they said that my son was just killed in a car accident, and I need to find out who it was. And, we talked about this, John and I talked about this later, and he was thinking, what does she mean? She needs to find out who this was. But it's like your body protects you, and that my mind had told myself that someone was in Bryant's truck. His wallet was in the console. They found his wallet. They think it's Bryant. It's not Bryant. Which one of Bryant's friends has died? And this is the story that my mind had to tell my body in order for me to get from Orange County to LAX, and from LAX airport with a direct flight into Memphis, which is where my son was. So this is my mind was telling myself stories until I got on the plane. And it wasn't until I got on the plane that I really lost it, because I knew that they would never allow me on the plane, number one, if I was hysterical as I was. And so John says, listen, you got to pull it together, because security's not going to let you on the plane. You've got to pull it together. So you automatically say, okay, in order to get to my son, I have to do this. And so you do it. Your body just does it, because then my goal was just to get to my son. And so I would do whatever I had to do to get there, no matter what kind of pain that I was in, or what story I had told myself. I had to get there. And I was at the gate, and I was just lost it. And I started bawling, crying. And I kept saying, Cherie, you got to pull it together. These flight attendants are not going to let you on the plane. And, it's funny, Cherie, because the people around me treated me as I was not even there. Like I was invisible. It was like they were terrified to talk to me. No one would speak to me. And I'm literally bawling in my hands, and no one would speak to me. I had a couple sitting on the next to me, and they just literally were reading books, like pretending like I didn't exist. And there was a mother, I'll never forget her, beautiful blonde-headed lady, and her teenage daughter, I would say she was probably 17, 18 years old, beautiful like her mother. And they came over and they knelt down in front of me where I was sitting, and they said, what can we do to help you? And I said, there's nothing you can do. And she said, can I ask you what's wrong? And I said, my son was killed in a car wreck, and I'm trying to get to Memphis. And, it was, I don't know exactly what they did or what they said, but I know they immediately went to the flight attendant, and they changed my seat. They put me in the very front, or basically the buckhead. So the front row right behind first class. First class was full. They put me in that front row in the aisle, and they moved me. And when I got on the plane, there was a lady sitting across the aisle from me, and she reached over and she grabbed my hand, and she said, what's wrong? And I told her, and she said, I know your pain. And Cherie, she spoke to me for that entire
Yeah.
4-hour flight. Everyone else sitting, the couple sitting beside me, not a word, never spoke, not
Oh,
one word, not, I'm so sorry. Can I get anything for you? Nothing. You know, it's amazing how under such tragedy, and they knew what was going on. Everybody around knew what was going on. The flight attendants were very attentive, but it's amazing how true character comes out in people in times of despair.
yeah.
And the true character of that mother and her daughter and the lady across the aisle, which obviously I was placed for a reason, came out during that horrific situation and that tragedy, and they didn't even know me. So that speaks to true character. But to say, you know, what did you do immediately? I think the immediate reaction is denial.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my denial. So, you know, the different forms of grief, the first one is denial, and we deny it in different ways. And that was my denial, that this was not happening. And that was my body protecting me from myself, basically.
Well, you know, it's so interesting how people react to others' emotional reactions because it's very triggering for us. And
Yeah,
when some people genuinely don't know what to do, and they're like, "Oh, she probably wants to be left alone," you know, oh,
true.
because that's how they are, because they're more
Yeah,
private in their pain. Um, but it's just as I'm listening to, it's like, oh, like I want to be that person who rushes to the aid. It's like that good Samaritan in the Bible kind of mentality,
right.
right? I want to be the person that rushes to the side of someone who's going through it. So I can be an angel in those moments. And some people might be completely overtly in pain where it's
Mhm.
obvious, while others it's more hidden. And so it's a different art. It's a different art of
Right.
reaching out. So you were in the you're in the airport, you get
Yeah.
on the plane. Um, what, like, I don't want to keep triggering and bringing it back for you, but like,
Oh, it's fine.
how did you, I mean, aside from emoting, right? Like what
Right.
did a part of you go into like, okay, there's certain things I need to do now? Because that's when I lost my sister to suicide, I was the one that went, okay, like I'm so sad and I'm falling apart. But then the next thought, I'm like, okay, what do we need to do now? How do we
Right.
galvanize? How do we, like the
Yeah.
family?
Right. No, exactly. And I think too that, you know, I've had a lot of grief by that of loss of death, because, you know, we talked about that before, that grief comes in different forms. But by loss of death, you know, it's a little different. That, you know, I've lost my grandparents. I lost my father 2 years ago. um, I've lost several people in my life. However, losing a child um, doesn't allow you to have that strength in that moment. And that's when other people have to stand up and
Have
be
to do
strong
that.
for you,
Yeah,
right?
I can see
So
that. Yeah.
when my dad died, I was like you, and that the initial grief, you know, my dad was at home, I was by his bedside, he took his last breath. And when you get, I won't say you don't get over it, because you don't get over it, but when you work yourself through that initial breakdown of, okay, my daddy is gone. Now I have to tend to my mother. Now I have to tend to things, right?
Mhm.
You're able to have that strength because, as the middle child, and as my son would tell you, the godfather of the family, if that's such a thing, um, when you have that reputation and that mentality to be that strength and that force for your family, you're going to step up, as you did when your sister passed. But when my son passed away, every ounce of strength that I thought that I couldn't find, nor was I looking for. I really was in such, it was a grieving process that I knew that my body, I didn't know at that time, but I know now that my body was going through. So the initial part of denial, I had to get through some of those phases first. And there's no time between the time that someone passes away and the time that you bury someone. There's not enough time to go through those phases of, you know, anger and bargaining and denial and depression and acceptance. I'm not going to do that in a 7-day period, right? Especially as a mother and as close of a relationship as I have with my 17-year-old son, Brian. So the other people had to stand up for me and basically take the wheel, because I was letting go of that wheel. Jesus, take the wheel is exactly what I did, because there was no way that I was not going to be the one to be able to drive that car. So they did. Other people took over. And I will tell you that his entire funeral was planned by my friends and my family, because first of all, I was in South Louisiana, and my son was in Memphis at the time, finishing high school, to move to South Louisiana. And because we had come to establish residency for college for both my son and my daughter, and they wanted to go to LSU. And so here I am with only the clothes that I had in my suitcase from my meeting in California. Here I am in Memphis with those. That's it. That's all I have, is a suitcase full of clothes. I don't have all of his pictures. I don't have anything. So all of my friends came together, and literally it was like they would come to me with 3 options and say, here, Cherie, do you want this, this, and this? The only planning that I had was when we went to the funeral home, and the funeral director made it as simple as possible for me to have to make the least amount of decisions. But there were some decisions that I made that I feel that Bryant made for me. When they put you in the car and they drive you around the cemetery and say, these are the plots we have open. Now, keep in mind this, I'm looking for a place to put my 17-year-old to rest. Where do you find the strength to do that? And so we're driving in the car, and we come around this circle, and the driver was the assistant funeral home director. She said, now this is the garden that we call Everlasting Life, and it's right across from the babies. And so there was a garden that had nothing but children in it. And then they had this garden that was called Everlasting Life. And I looked over when she said it, and there was a tree right in the middle. And it was literally like Bryant saying, Mom, I want to be under the tree by the kids. And so I said, he wants to be under the tree by the kids. And of course, everybody's looking at me like, what do you mean he wants to be, And I said, that's where I feel drawn to. He wants to be right there. Now, keep in mind, I didn't even know if there was anything under this tree, but it wasn't an audible voice. It was just a knowing, right? It was just a knowing that he was telling me or leading me, whether it be his spirit connecting with my spirit. It was, he wanted to be under that tree in the Garden of Everlasting Life by the kids. He loved kids. And so I said, that's where he wants to be. And she goes, well, I'll have to see if we have, a plot under the tree. I said, no, there's one there. He told me there's one there, and he told me that's where he wants to be. And we got back, and she goes, oh, well, yeah, actually there is one, and it's right under the tree. I said, yeah, I knew that. So, that's where we buried him, under the tree. And other than all of the other decisions that you just kind of block out, whether it be flowers or coffins or, that was such a faded memory that I don't want to remember, that I don't care to remember, that doesn't add value or any purpose to my life. I do strongly remember where he wanted to be. So that particular memory stays with me, because I truly feel like, Bryant could have cared less what flowers he had or what coffin he was in, but he knew exactly where he wanted to be or where he wanted to be laid to rest. And so that was the only real legitimate decision that I made. And I stood steadfast, and that's where he was going to be. And that's where he is.
That's remarkable that your friends came through and did that, and that they were able to serve you, and that you could be served. Because I know sometimes for women who are real go-getters or have it all together, typically to be served like that's quite humbling.
Yeah, you let that go though, Cherie. I mean, it's almost like you don't, it's not that you make a conscious decision to let it go and let them help you. You literally don't have the physical ability. It's like God tying my hands behind my back and putting me at rest and allowing me. And, my girlfriends that helped me through that time, and One of them was my best friend since we were 15 years old, and we're still friends today. We live 15 minutes apart. She was the one with the notepad. You know, it's like everybody had their place. It was that friend that was the picture gatherer, and the friend that took the notes, and the friend that did the speaking. And, you know, it's amazing how each one of their personalities rose to the top. And that in that struggle and that horrific tragedy that I was in. And McGann was the one that sat at the head of the table with the notepad, taking all the notes, because she knew not to mess anything up, because I would have her head for it. You know, I mean, she was that one. And, you know, she was the one that would try to bring me a sandwich, you know, and she didn't know what else to do but try to feed me, or, you know, she was that friend. And, you know, it's crazy that the morning that we buried Bryant, it was her birthday. And she had forgotten. She didn't even know it was her birthday. Her husband and kids were driving up to Memphis from South Louisiana, and they called her to tell her happy birthday, and she didn't even know it was her birthday.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah. And so forever, the day we buried Bryant would be McGann's birthday. You know, which I guess you can look at that in different ways, that, you know, we don't think about the actual burial. We can think about McGann and celebrate McGann on her birthday, which can help you to and distractions. And, you know, and as a mother that's lost a child, and any mother that's lost a child that's listening knows that there are certain triggers. There are trigger days, right? So, you know, Mother's Day is a little difficult for me. Bryant's birthday is not as difficult for me as the anniversary of his death, which is July 12th. And Christmas Eve is a little difficult. Not so much Christmas Day, but Christmas Eve. And it may be because he was he loved Christmas. So there are different triggers. And when you know what your triggers are, it's best to try to do things to avoid those triggers. Because you can go backwards, and you can go back in grief when you've gone forward. You never want to go back. When you get to the point of acceptance, you don't want to go back to the part of depression, because it lasts much longer when you go backwards.
I see that. I can see that. So,
yes.
Okay. So you know, I always say that, like, you become an expert in whatever you walk through. It's kind of like how we started this discussion.
Right.
But, you know, with someone like you who was like, how do I take this out? And how do I mean, I have a good friend, she's probably even listening to this. Her name is Chrissy, and she had 7 beautiful daughters, no sons, and lost her 7th daughter to SIDS. And she was very vocal. Like she has that very extroverted, sweet social personality. So she would get on Marco whenever she was grieving, and she would send some of her friends, me included, just this really raw, like, I'm laying in my bed, I have no makeup on, I'm sobbing. You know, some people process that way. Me personally, I've walked through lots of grief myself. It was my MO for a long time, including losing my firstborn daughter. My grief, I would go inside myself. Like, I would kind of just privately, like a private sufferer, if you will. And even going through, I talk a lot about on this podcast about the dark night of the soul, which is just kind of a space you can go into in your life where you lose a lot of things. And you know this, grief doesn't have to be about death. We normally associate it with that. We can grieve a lot of things because we attach to things. So anyway, I am more of that, like, suffer in sorrow and silence and whatever. But what you said was really pivotal, in that there comes a time where you realize you are not an island, and you got to get past that. You need other people.
Right.
You need the transparency. They need it from you. When my husband and I almost got divorced last year, we were separated 10 months. We just moved back in together this last April of 2020. And we've been married 25 years. We just celebrated a 25-year anniversary. But anyway, that was gut-wrenching. And I was told by Spirit, like, post what you're feeling. I was like, no, it's just like raw, like I can't. And I did anyway. And I cannot tell you, Cherie, like, I was inundated with private messages from people that I had no idea were suffering with the same thing.
Right.
and having, I didn't lose a child in the way you did, but there's a whole story with my firstborn daughter, losing her at birth. Also my sister's suicide. I think the different aspects of loss, like so many people are in transition right now. They may not be losing a loved one in the typical way, but everything on this planet is shifting.
Mm.
So how would you speak to that? Like, I think, and I think we all take on each other's stuff and we don't even know that we are.
Yes.
Like, we're watching the news, we're internally, if you're an empathic person, especially, like, you're going to take it on.
Right. Yeah. And I'm definitely an empathic person. And because I know that, if you know that of yourself, you have to be able to dial it down, right? Because you take on so many people's energy, whether it's negative or positive. And I think sometimes too, when we're listening to negative talk, or we're watching negativity, whether it be what's going on in the world today. And we were talking about before, politics, how it's ripping relationships, and it's ripping families and friendships apart. It's just so sad to watch it happen. That's a form of grief, right? So we're all grieving right now. Everyone's grieving. People are losing their businesses. They've lost their jobs. Their jobs stem directly into their income, and their income in order to pay their bills and keep the roof over their head. So it's trickling down. First comes the job, and then you can't pay your bills. And then when you can't pay your bills, you lose your home, and you lose your home. Where do you go? And so the grief and the agony just lingers and lingers on, but I will tell you one thing that people today forget. And it's very simple. It's a simple thing, but we forget it because we become so immune to it that we ignore it. And that's gratefulness.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, it is really simple. Having a grateful heart, sometimes we hear it repeatedly. Oh yeah, have a grateful heart, have a grateful heart. We hear that over and over. We become immune to the powerful truth that it actually contains.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have seen how powerful having a grateful heart is, I want everyone to know you can truly shift your entire life in a new direction when you develop and express a grateful heart. What are you grateful hearts? So people say, how have you gotten through this? How have you gotten through this? How do you get through this, Cherie? Because I have to continually be grateful for what I have. I do have a daughter. I have a son that was 7 when he lost his 17-year-old brother. A 7-year-old to a 17-year-old is a hero. We used to joke and say that Bryant is just one step above Jesus when it comes to Carson, because that was Carson's hero in life, was his 17-year-old brother. And we forget that other people are suffering as the mom, but I'm the mom. Pay attention to my pain. I'm the one that put in here. But what about your children? What about the people around you? They need to see that person of strength and that pillar of strength in the family begin to have some type of acceptance. So what I did is I said, God, show me what I need from this, because I am just a small smidgen of what I once was. Mm-hmm. And God told me he didn't want me to be what I was. He wanted me to be more than I was. And what he did is he began to show me the grateful heart that was always there, but I had become immune to that terminology of having a grateful heart. And I began to write. So as writing in a journal to me is so powerful. And that's why I created in June the 30-day devotional and lifestyle workbook, Create Your Life, because I know what journaling did for me. And I know what prayer did for me. And so the book is all about prayer and journaling. And I did that every day, not for 30 days, like this journal takes you on, but for 7 years.
Wow.
I wrote every pain that I had, because I didn't want to burden anyone, but I had to get it out. And so to get it out meant to write it out. And so I journaled, I wrote down pain. The first time I wrote was November 12th, which was so Bryant died July 12th, November 12th, that year was my birthday. And I picked up a journal that somebody gave me, just a blank leather bound book. And I wrote how I felt on my first birthday, not having a son.
Mm.
And from there, I just continually wrote. And it wasn't until I had a coworker reach out to me. Now, keep in mind, I had been in bed for 6 to 8 weeks. Yes, I had a brand new job, and I was so grateful to the CEO of that company that says, take all the time you need. And he never docked me a day of pay. Not everyone has that luxury, but somehow God gave me that luxury at that time in my life. And he basically made it a little bit easier for me to lay in bed. But my coworker called me and said, Cherie, I need you to help somebody. And I'm thinking, I can't help anybody. Are you kidding me? Like I'm M&M's is my drug of choice right now. And the only thing that I can find the strength to do is pick up a pen and write down my pain. And you want me to make a phone call? And he said, we had someone in our church that just lost her son a few days ago in a motorcycle accident. And we're scared that she's going to commit suicide. And we really need you to call her.
Wow.
Now, I don't know this woman. I don't even live in this town. He's in a totally different state than me. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to call this woman. I'm going to do it for him because I loved this guy. Very nice guy. And so I did. I picked up the phone and I called her. And we stayed on the phone for an hour. We cried, we talked, we cried, we talked. But when she said to me, before we hung up, she said, thank you so much for calling me, because I felt like I was at a point of no return. And you have no idea what this phone call has meant to me.
Wow.
And so when she hung up, and I thought, wow, I really helped her. But what I realized was it wasn't the fact that I helped her. It was what helping her did for me.
Mm-hmm.
And what it did for me is heal just a little tiny smidgen of me that God said to me, now you have found your purpose.
Mm.
I want you to take your pain and I want you to help people that go through adversity. And he took me literally by a leash because I said, I don't want to be that person. I just want my son back. That's the only thing that I kept saying. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person. And I became that person.
Mm-hmm.
So I was actually always that person, but I had not gone through that pain yet to be able to be that person. So we can't really, you wouldn't go to someone that, weighs 400 or 500 pounds and ask them how to get in shape. Right. So, we actually we are attracted to the person that we want to be. You wouldn't go to someone that's broke and doesn't even have a roof over their head and ask them how to make money.
Mm-hmm.
You're attracted to someone and that person of who you want to be. And so the people that are attracted to me are those that want to be healed through adversity. Not everyone wants to, Cherie, and that's what
I know. There's a
understand.
huge payoff for staying stuck in the pain.
Yes. And misery loves company. So misery, and that's a saying, but it's a true saying, that misery wants to stay in a point of misery because we do find comfort. Just like hoarders, they find comfort in all that stuff around them because to them, that's their shield of protection. If I keep all of my house completely junked up and I sit in the middle of it, nothing can hurt me right here.
Yeah.
And that's where hoarding comes from. So we always find our shield, but my shield is the power of God and the gratefulness that he's given me, and the mercy and the grace has gotten to me to where I am today, which started my book, Wake Up Call, A Mother's Grief Journey, which is my first book. And then which I just allow him to guide me, right? So it got me to you, and you're on my show and I'm on your show. And then the healing just continues because we reach different people at different times, and we should start. People say, well, I'm going to do better when I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
I'll start losing weight, or I'll start healing from my grief, or I'll start saving money when this happens. No, the right time to heal and the right time to start and the right time to grow is starting right where you are. I didn't want to grow where I was. I was in the bed eating M&Ms. I didn't want to grow right there. I thought, I'll do better later. Just let me get through this part. Let me just feel misery right now. And I will start to heal. And God says, no, you're going to start right now. And you're going to start with that phone call. Mm. And that's where we have to start. We have to start in the place right in the midst of our pain is where you start to heal. Because if you don't, you'll never heal.
Yeah,
you'll never heal.
I totally agree. And I teach this thing called spiritual bypassing, which I think Carl Jung was the first one to teach about this, but it's basically like everybody wants to be spiritual. Everyone wants to be enlightened. Everyone wants to feel good. However, when we gloss over our deep pain in the name of feeling better spiritually, because everything's spiritual anyway, even in the pain, that's super spiritual, right? But because
Yes.
we are programmed to not feel pain. We would rather, as human beings, we'd rather run from pain than run to pleasure any day. That's just how we're programmed. Like you said, it's like death. It's like a death. We go into fight or flight and we just feel like we're not going to make it. We're not going to pull through when we're in it. But when you climb into that, not wallow in it necessarily, although that's
Right.
warranted for a season. But when you really climb into it and you ask and you feel it and you let it ride and you stay with it, you don't prolong the grief process when you do that. You go in it and you go
Right.
through it. And there's another saying I love: the only way out is through. It's true. Like, that's what I mean by spiritual bypassing. Most people, in the name of spirituality, if they start to feel uncomfortable, they think they're not being spiritual. And so they don't climb into the dark or the pain. They're not, there's this other thing called conscious suffering, which is a whole different thing than just going and checking out. It's like, oh, I feel all of this.
Right.
I love these tips. So writing was really healing for you, having
Yes.
a grateful heart, reaching out to other people. Your faith was obviously a big piece of faith in God and being able to attach to that. Grace. I love the concept of grace. I think it's the most misunderstood
Right.
aspect of humanity is grace. Grace for each
Yeah.
other, grace
And
from
you
God.
have to give it to yourself.
Oh,
It's one thing
totally.
to have great grace and mercy, but you have to give it, you have to give grace to yourself. And there's a reason behind the 30 days, because um, you can change a habit in 30 days. I didn't just grab 30 days for a 30-day devotional because I thought it was a good number. There's actual power behind
Mm-hmm.
doing something straight for 30 days, which is why I came out with that book, not just so you can read scripture every day, but because I want you to recognize your pain and I want you to grow for 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
And there's truth behind it. I did research behind the 30 days, and there's truth behind doing the same thing. And here's the thing: for someone sitting in misery today, Cherie, that says, yeah, I just don't know where to start. And I'm just tired and I just don't like my job. And my mom died. And, I'm going to have to put my dog down, or whatever the reason is. What I say to that person is, fine. If you want to stay in your misery right now because it's comfortable, that's great. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to walk through 30 days of no complaining, no misery, and no negativity. And then I'm going to allow you to go back to your comfort of misery. I'm going to give you permission to go back to it if you'll do it my way for 30 days. And you know what will happen? No one is going to go back to it. But if you give people permission to go back to the misery of that comfort zone, then they think that it's a test. And it really is a test, but it's a test that I know that's going to take you to a different level, and you're not going to be able to go to that place of misery, but I'm going to give you permission to go there. You have permission to go backwards.
Yeah,
It's okay, but
I
you have to try
absolutely love.
something different for 30 days.
Yes, that whole permission granted, like, is huge for people, because we get so caught up in, is this okay? Is this right or wrong? Am I doing this right? Is it okay to grieve this long? Is it okay? I will say one thing about grief is it's very cyclical. And
Yeah,
so it can come out of nowhere. Um, and I have a whole theory with that. Like, when you're strong and sustained and your body's stabilized, that's when grief can come up again. Because you
exactly.
think to yourself, like, oh, like, I'm doing really well. Well, and then you have another grief episode and it's like, oh, my body's subconscious knew I was strong. And so it allowed this to surface again. So I can start to heal another layer of this.
Right.
My sister's suicide it's been 15 years, but, and it comes in waves. Um, yeah. So, okay. I could just sit here and just shoot the bull. It's not even bull.
Me
Like, I
too.
don't even know. Shoot the truth with you forever. So, is there anything that you would, I love how you just did that beautiful nurturing call out of people who are sitting in pain. Is there anything else that you would share with those who have suffered a loss on any level right now as we kind of wrap up our discussion, and then also tell people where to find you?
Yeah, I guess the only thing that I can say to people that are suffering right now in grief, whether it be you're going through a divorce, you've lost your identity, you've buried a child or a mother or a sister or a friend or whatever the grief is that you're going through, because we all go through it, right? Pain is universal. Loss is universal. At one point in time, you're going to suffer. Or you may be listening and it's not happening to you personally, but it's happening to someone that you know. And so you can be that angel today. And remember, when you're doing something for someone else, it brings healing to you. And you're also setting seeds for healing that may come to, for pain that may come to you later. And so just because you're not going through something right now, if you're planting a seed for someone else as being their angel, or in the Bible, I guess we'd say, as being someone's Simon, because Simon was the one that picked up the cross for Jesus and helped him walk the rest of the way. So if you could be someone's Simon today, then when you're suffering, believe me, those seeds that you planted are actually for you. They're going to come back 10 times fold. So if you're suffering in something today, I would say reach out to someone else and help them through their suffering. It takes your mind off of what you're going through, but you're also planting seeds. You're being someone else's Simon. And also, I found journaling being very healing. Not everyone likes to write. So if you don't want to write, you can actually record yourself, and you'll be surprised what that could turn into. That you can record yourself and just get it out. If your husband walked out the door for the secretary, record yourself saying everything that you want to say to that man right now. Don't say it to someone else, because then what you're doing is planting a seed of negativity and misery into someone else. And no one wants to be that for someone, right? So just say it into a recording, write it on a piece of paper. And another thing that I walked some women through when I used to do coaching, and I don't do it as much anymore because of time restraints with the podcast show and all of the writing. And I used to do a lot of speaking until COVID hit, was that one of the things that I did to help others that were suffering is I had them write whatever their suffering was. And if they would give themselves permission to heal from it, then I would tell them to go in the backyard, write down all of their pains and suffering, put it in something that is fireproof, and set it on fire. And when you set all of that pain on fire, you're agreeing at that moment that you're going to put that pain behind you and you're going to start walking forward. Even if it's just doing small affirmations every day for 30 days, take a little Post-it note and tell yourself and give yourself permission and tell yourself how great you are for 30 days. And people suffering don't want to do it. But like I said, I'll let you go back to your misery in 30 days if you'll do it my way right now. Then you can do that as well. But just try something different. Try something different, and then we'll let you go back to your misery.
That's cool. That backup plan, it's always, but like you said, no one's going to go back. Like once you felt
you're not going to go back. And that's the point in my challenge.
Yeah. And the only other thing I would leave our listeners with too, when it comes to concept of grace, because a lot of people have been wounded by the misunderstanding of that, either from a religious or a weird family system or friends or the media or whatever. But what you were saying about giving yourself grace, the grace is intact. It's flowing to you already. It's no matter where you've been, what you've done, what you've walked through, whatever choices you've made, the grace is flowing. When you decide to give it to yourself, that's when you feel the flow.
Right.
That's when you actually start to feel it. So after those 30 days, when you experience that flow and you've made these routines and you've put these things in your life that allow that flow to happen, ain't no way you're going back, sister. Like, there's no way.
That's right.
I want to.
You're not going back.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And that's the whole point in the challenge. But it's just that mental, giving someone that it's a psychological twist. If I'm allowing you to go back to where you are right now in your state of misery, if you choose to, then I'm also, you're giving me permission to take you somewhere else for 30 days. And you're looking at it as a limited time. So anyone can do anything for 30 days, right? You can eat salads and go on a diet for 30 days. And if I tell you to eat this way and do something different in your body for 30 days, and then allow you to go back to chocolate chip cookies and your pizza, then you're going to look at that weight loss totally different.
Yeah, just a
You're
temporary.
not going to want to go backwards, right?
Yeah. So how do people find you, Cherie? What are you offering?
I guess the best way, if you're looking on social media, it's Real Girl Talk Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. And then when you jump on Facebook, you will see it's called Empowerment is Beauty. And you can also go to my website, realgirltalkpodcast.com. You can subscribe there, where you'll get a lot of different updates. I usually send out newsletters a couple of times a week that it's just really a dose of inspiration, as well as what's going on in the Real Girl Talk podcast community.
I love it. And I know you're coming up on your 100th episode, as am I.
Yes.
And so it's fun, huh? Like, just,
it is.
Can you even imagine if
yes.
you hadn't started this journey of just talking to people and getting out of your whatever comfort zone or your bubble or whatever, just to be in the world with people and interview people?
It really is. The people that I have met is just incredible. The people that have been on my show and share their lives. I mean, I'm grateful. I have a grateful heart for this platform, that I know that it's reaching people, because I see the numbers and I see the downloads, and I know that Real Girl Talk Podcast has been great for thousands of people, and that's exciting in itself.
Yeah, love it. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Cherie. This has been so healing for me, and I know it'll help a lot of our listeners.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cherie. Thank you for tuning in all the way through Real Girl Talk. Make sure you subscribe anywhere you listen to podcasts. And if you happen to have iTunes, would you do me a huge favor and leave us a rating and review of the show? That's the way that we get this message out to more and more people around the world. And selfishly giving us a review and rating, something good is going to come back your way. Plus, I know you're the type of person that wants others to live their best life. So can you copy this link, share it to your friends, share it on social media? Remember, people need to be inspired. They need to have tips. They need to have business ideas more than ever right now. And I know that you can help me on this mission. Thank you again so much. If you want to be a supporter of the show, go back to realgirltalkpodcast.com, click Be a Supporter. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart for being a part of Real Girl Talk Podcast. And until next week, keep your encouragement tank full, your faith in God, and create your beautiful life.